You are listening to the Baobab Project. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us under the Baobab tree from wherever you are in the world today. We are joining you from Halifax, Nova Scotia. We've got so much to explore, from culture to lifestyle to health, relationships, education, and so much more. Now over to our podcast host for today.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is our third podcast, and welcome onto the Baobab tree as we explore disability, what you need to know about my experience. And I have with me today four panel members, Kia, Tommy, Nisha, and Julie, and they will share their experiences with us. So sit back and relax. There'll be an opportunity for members of the audience to ask questions as well. But most of all, we would love to hear the experiences that these women will bring to the table to help to better inform our community. So again, you're under the Baobab tree and welcome. So I'll start with that by asking Julie to introduce herself.
Yes. Hi, Randy. Thanks for having me today. I am Julie Fillmore. I'm the Assistive Technology Specialist at Mount St. Vincent, and I work alongside the Accessibility Services team. And we are here to support students with disabilities participate in their course material and their coursework at the Mount.
Thank you, Julie. And Nisha, can I ask you to join in, please?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Randy, for having me on the podcast today. My name is Nisha. I am from the Toronto area. I work for CNIB Foundation's GTA. I'm the Advocacy and Outreach Coordinator. I've been in this position for the past 4 months. And what I do is I work with CNIB volunteers. My volunteers are called ambassadors, and they're members of the sight loss community who use guide dogs, white canes, or other forms of mobility aids. And what they do is they go into the community and they provide guidance and education to the public on their lives as individuals living with sight loss, and how they live fruitful and normal and independent lives like anyone else. And they also answer questions from the community on how to best support the community, the sight loss community.
Thank you, Nisha. And Tommy, can you jump in there, please?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tommy Additional. I'm a student at the Mount. I'm in the public policy program, and I'm going to my 4th year. I don't like positions or titles or anything because I feel like everything in this world is fluid. But the only thing that's constant to me is me. So that's all you need to know right now. I'm Tommy, and I'm interested in talking about social inclusion and accessibility and friendship. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. This seems to be like it will be lots of fun today. And Kia, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. And my name is Kia. I'm also from the Toronto area for the CNIB GTA Foundation. And my role is I'm a team lead for program development. So that's part management. And the other part of my role is program lead for youth empowerment. So I create programs for youth with sight loss that really build confidence, self-advocacy, and independence, very more social and life-enhancing programs. And through my programming, I had the wonderful opportunity to meet Tommy, which is who has been instrumental in making this happen. So thank you, Tommy, for bringing this conversation up, and happy to be here to contribute.
Thank you, Kia. This is promising to be a very interesting conversation today, and I believe I can safely say that Tommy is the center of all of this. She was the one that was able to bring all of us together, and I'm hoping that today we will be able to further stretch our wings and bring the kind of knowledge into the wider community that will help them to understand disabilities and help them to understand the experiences of those who are around us and are experiencing the world different from the way we experience it. All right, I'll begin by asking Tommy this question. What do you wish others understood about your disability?
Understood about my disability, understood about me, because disability is just a condition. And yes, we do have guidelines and things to consider, but I do want people to make sure that they're paying attention to the individual behind the mobility aid, behind the name tag. So if we're talking about what do I want people to know about my disability, I would say, all that information is already out there if you just Google it. But I think people really need to know that we are human beings. We love to laugh, and we want to be well, I don't want to speak for everybody else, but I would say that just like you have your unique abilities and you have your unique life and you want things to be a certain way for yourself, you have dreams, you have plans, you have hopes. That's the same way we also live. We have the same life. It's just a disability. So I think that I want people to start to humanize us more. Don't be scared. Just see everyone as a human being.
Thank you, Tommy. And I chose you first because you're coming from a student perspective. Is there anything else you'd like to share about what you would like the campus to know about your experience being a student with a disability?
So for me, there's the philosophy of hide your disability, or don't let everybody know that you have a disability in class as a student, or just even walking around. But for me, that kind of mentality, that kind of philosophy, it traps me. It doesn't allow me to be me. So I'm always going to be vibrant, and I don't think everybody should, if you want to hide your disability, that's fine. But if you want to live free and, not care, just do your own thing. If you feel like you want to talk about your disability, do that. I think that's it for me. I think everybody is an individual. That's how I would say, that's how I want the campus to feel. Like, we're not, like, we all need love. The same thing. Just break that barrier in your head. That's what I want them to know.
Thank you, Tommy. And you've raised a very good point there when you said hide your disability. This brings me to the question of the visible and invisible disabilities. So, Julie, you might be able to jump in here and help the audience to understand this question as well. In your run of the day dealing with students on both sides of the conversation, what do you wish MSVU and those in your circle understood about disability?
Well, that's a loaded question, Randy, because I have so much to say on that topic. I'll try to be brief, though. I think what immediately comes to mind is exactly what Tommy said. I often get asked questions, about, working with people with disabilities and supporting them, and how do you do this, that, and the other? And my answer is always the same. That's very static, and the answer is, the same way you would deal with any other person. We're in my role is to support human beings, not diagnosis. So I think that's the biggest thing. Invisible and visible disabilities. Actually, the most of our students consist of invisible disabilities, not visible disabilities. So, there's many more students than you realize on campus and in your community and surrounding each of you. And I think what I wish that our campus, something that I wish other people would know is that, not every diagnosis is the same, has the same impact on every human being. And that at the end of the day, you're doing the kindest, humane thing by getting to know a human being as a person, just the same way you would anyone else, whether they did or did not identify with any particular diagnosis or disability.
Thank you, Julie. So let me bring Nisha in on this question. We have grasped an understanding of what it is like to be a student and also a staff at MSVU, and how you interact with folks on campus and what you'd like them to know about your disability. So in bringing Nisha in on this question, I think what we're hoping you might be able to answer, Nisha, is what does it look like outside of our circle, the university setting, and what it is like in your context. So tell us what you would like others to know about your disabilities in your own context.
Okay. Thank you, Randy. I think in a way, my experience is not that much different than someone who is in school. I too have sight loss. And for me, I don't lead with that. So when you see me, I want you to see me first. I introduce myself. I say, hi, my name is Nisha. I don't say, hi, my name is Nisha, I'm blind. That's my sight loss is a part of me. It's not what I lead with. And just like you pointed out, just like people who are sighted, I do work, I do socialize, I have friends, I have hobbies, I travel. There are things that I like to do. I just happen to have low vision. Um, the only thing is I can't drive and I can't fly a plane. So I think that's where I stand with that.
Thank you, Nisha. And I love that introduction that you've just given. You will notice that I didn't say, Nisha blind, please introduce yourself. Correct. You were correct in saying you don't introduce yourself as, hi, my name is Nisha, I'm blind. And this is something that I think the wider society should understand, that calling people by their names is very important, and not to see the disabilities that that person might have. So thank you for those questions. So I'll jump right in and ask Kia to give us a sense of what your organization would do to support others, and I want to say students as well, students with disabilities, but those in the community. What does your organization do to support others with disabilities?
Thank you, Randy. So with CNIB, as a whole, we are, especially with the foundation side of it, because again, there has been changes to CNIB traditionally, where all rehab and foundation services, programs and services were all together. Now that it's we use the term trifurcated, so we have Vision Loss Rehab Canada, we have the foundation, which Nisha and I do our work, and also we have deaf-blind community services. So they serve the deaf-blind community. So from the foundation perspective, we provide programs and services to enhance the lives of persons with sight loss. So again, if you are a person with sight loss, you're at a certain level. So for example, if you need any, adaptive devices, orientation and mobility, which is, use of your cane, any types of skills. If you're new to sight loss, you would start off at vision loss community rehab. So you get the necessary independent living skills for the home, orientation and mobility, so you can navigate safely within your community, your basic assistive tech skills if you're new to using, computers, because again, you're transitioning to either your screen reader as using JAWS or NVDA, or again, like myself, I use Zoom Text with voice, which is a screen magnification. So that's one part. Once you have those basic necessary skills that you're able to adapt to your daily life, then you come over to the foundation side, and we have a plethora of programs where, again, we have our advocacy when it comes to advocating for all age groups. We have youth programs, again, where tapping it back into school age. We have programs where, through our camps or even through individual programs where we can assess the need, or not so much assess, but really assist the needs of students with sight loss when it comes to, again, educating yourself and making sure you're empowered when it comes to realizing what your rights are, when it comes to demanding and asking for accessible documents for your education. That's important. Again, if you're for pre-employment, we have our Come to Work program. Again, we do the assessments where if you're a young person coming out of school, using the youth perspective, since again, we're talking to, young people in university, and also I do youth programming. Again, if you want to prepare for, employment, again, with our Come to Work program, we assess what your needs are when it comes to your assistive tech. Again, the disability, your disclaimer, if you want to disclose your disability, because that is your right. It's not something that you have to do when it comes to employment until you get to a certain point. But we give you all the skills, make sure that you're job ready, your skills are ready. Again, and then bringing it back to making sure you're able to travel independently, making sure your assistive tech skills are up to par so you can compete with able-bodied counterparts. So we really embody all of those things to make sure our community is well served, if that answers your question. There's so much more I can go, but I know we only have so much time.
Thank you, Kia. I thought, I should have asked Julie that question first. And then let's see, from a student perspective, after going through the university, then ask you the question next to see that transition of who takes up the student, who take up that student and help them to move to the next level. Well, it doesn't matter. We can do things any way we like, because we're under the baobab tree right now, and this is knowledge we are creating and we are sharing. So, Julie, I'll jump right in and ask you the same question. What does your organization do to support students with disabilities?
Thanks, Randy. First, I love this collaborative conversation right now. I'm excited to be a part of it. Thank you. And I love that. One of the reasons I love what I do so much is because I get to hear the different perspectives from different individuals. And that leads me to how we at the Mount do approach supporting students with disabilities. And that is through a social model whereby, it's a person first, and, and then we look at problem solving. That's in my nature. I can't stop myself from doing it, actually. And so I'm like, okay, working with Tomi has been an amazing, super exciting challenge for me, and I love it. So because, it helps to identify things that need to be corrected and fixed and amended in the community, just in general for all students. And then, of course, I get to work on supporting, individual unique circumstances for her. That's always the approach that we take, is looking at task-focused kind of approach. Due to the nature of my position, I tend to work most closely with students who require the most amount of supports. And that means that we get pretty close and pretty tight. So I often forget what their diagnosis is. I'm quite aware of what Tomi's is, but it's not the forefront of my mind. I'm like, hey, Tomi, it's very organic and lovely. And that's what we do. That's part of it. The other part is we spend an awful lot of time educating, sharing, communicating, trying to promote awareness, advocating, all of those things for our students to try and, teach others things that they can do to support not just our students, but all students. We're all naturally inclined, we're born with our own innate biases and, our environments and our life stories kind of help produce our own judgments on things that you don't personally have experience with. And then, it often is, it's a conversation. If somebody isn't aware of what little things they can do to support a student, and I get the opportunity to provide that information to them, it's enlightening. And then, it's a kind of a pay it forward approach. I mean, it's not really that, but kind of, because it, it entices people, that it creates awareness and understanding. They realize that there's so little things that they do, microaggressions and things that you have in your own self that you don't know that you're doing. Actually, that happens all the time. But conversations happen one by one, and I'm thrilled with the outcome more often than not. People are enlightened, and I love that. So I think that our students feel I hope they do, feel very supported, and we do look at them very much as individuals and not their disability.
Thank you, Julie. Let me bring Tomi in on this next question. And Tomi, can you help us to understand what are some of the struggles you experienced on campus? After Tomi answered this question, I'll ask Kia to jump in with a similar question, but I'll get to that very shortly. So Tomi, when you answer this question, and I'll read it again, what are some of the struggles you experienced on campus? The second part to this question, after answering that one, is to also mention some of your coping strategies, the coping strategies that you used while on campus as well.
Thank you, Randy. I love this question. This is my favorite question. So first things first, stigma. And I've only begun to unpack stigma. Stigma stems from fear. Stigma stems from a lack of understanding. Stigma stems from a lack of knowledge. Stigma stems from miscommunication. My biggest challenge, my biggest struggle at the Mount is stigma. So socially, and Randy, you and I have talked about this, even with Black students, and especially even with Black students. And I totally understand it. That's the good thing about it. There's stigma. I've talked about like being at the bus stop and standing next to other Black students, and once they see me, they move far away from me because they don't want to be associated or stand next to someone who's using a white cane. In the elevator, and white students do this too, but anyway. So in the elevator, like we've introduced ourselves, we've had an introduction before. Like let's say I've met Julie before, and then Julie's in the elevator with me, and she just acts like she doesn't know me. And for me, as a person with sight loss, I need you to say your name when you see me, because there's no way I'll know if you're in the elevator. But for me, like sometimes I'll be standing really close to people and I'll be like, I know this person, like we've talked before. Why wouldn't they announce their presence and let's touch base or something? They'll do that with other students. They'll talk to other students and they'll socialize. But it's almost like when the first time they introduced themselves to me, they were just doing it just to do it, and not to look like they're socially discriminating or anything like that. So they don't have that interest. They're like, let's just be acquaintances. Let's not move further. Let's not grow a friendship or anything like that. So I think that for me, social stigma has been like the biggest struggle for me on campus. And even like with accessing library services or library people are wonderful, but when you're going to the desk as a first year student, many times because you don't really understand the way the library website works, people start to look at that as weak, as incompetent, like you don't know what you're doing. But really, it's just a lot of new stuff, and you need a lot of many trials to actually get familiar with something like the library services. So now, if I find something inaccessible, I'll email the library services, but I don't talk to them all the time, not as much as my first year. So all these things create stigma because for a sighted person, for instance, they could just, go to the library page and just do their thing. Maybe they'll talk to them like once or twice, but then they're good. So that's something there. And I just want to unpack stigma in the sense of when I was growing up, I grew up in Nigeria, West Africa, and we didn't have discussions about persons with disabilities. There was no discussion. And I know it's the same for a lot of students coming from West Africa as well. We didn't have that discussion. And so when you meet someone your age who has a disability, you don't really know how to approach it. It's almost even sometimes, like I'm gonna be honest, it was like for me growing up when I saw persons with disabilities, I'll be like, it was like, oh, don't talk to them, like don't go there, don't approach. And I see it very much in students today. And then I didn't realize it, but now I know it now that I'm a person with a disability. So I think it's very important that we all, even white students, we all just like address our opinions and our perceptions of disability, of what it is to have sight loss, what it is to use a mobility impairment. My other struggles, I think, with staff members is that some staff members are scared. I've gotten like the fear vibe from some staff members when they see me, which is, I'm Black and I use a white cane and I'm a woman in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So, I may be a huge, like a huge bubble of newness to them. So they're like, like, how did she drop on this side of the planet? So, I think that that's something else. And I think just like lack of knowledge, like for instance, for me, if I come to your office and the task I'm about to do is very much about documentation. So there are lots of papers involved. I really struggle with that, even if I'm using my magnifier. I really struggle with that because it's paper, and sometimes staff members are not thinking of, oh, this is paper. How can I best accommodate this person that's coming in? Like, what's her mode of doing stuff? My coping strategies, I would say I didn't have one for a very long time, which was quite damaging. But for me, I would say it's two things. First, understanding why people react the way they react. And so whether it's with students, I know, okay, maybe you guys, your families didn't have that discussion, or this is just really new to you, you don't know how to deal with this. And for staff members, I'm like, okay, I'm not your conventional student that you see every day. So that kind of makes me come to terms with like what's happening. But as I said, that didn't happen for a very long time. And my second coping mechanism is, oh my God, now I forgot. My second coping mechanism is speaking up. Yes. So whether it's in class or by writing articles or by just talking to people around me, whether it's my family or my friends, that helps me deal, even if it's just for one day. That helps me keep going. I'm more of like, I'm an extrovert, so I tend to, I don't even know if this is an extrovert thing, but I tend to like, I find pleasure in saying how I feel. So that's something for me, is that um saying how I feel helps. And I'm also gonna be honest, Randy, counseling services, people. I did not intend to say that because, counseling is very confidential and all of that stuff. But counseling services really helps you because they help you unpack your feelings. And that has really, like, it has made me more aware of why I feel a certain way or what's going on around me. I know I'm talking for a very long time. I'm going to shut up very soon. Um, but, people need to access counseling services more, even if it's just to know yourself more and recognize the reason behind your feelings and know when you're to blame and when it's the other person to blame. Because when you're a student with a disability in a very in an institution built for able-bodied people, it can seem like you're at fault for a number of different things when it's really not your fault. It's just the institution is not accommodating your body or your experiences or your mind. So, yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. That was very deep. And you don't have to apologize for anything. I love those coping strategies. And I love the way you listed all of those struggles that you experienced. Kia, I'm going to ask you to jump in on this one as well. And as you answer the questions, just think of what Tommy just said, and if anything has changed since your university days. So the question was, what are some of the struggles you experience on campus? And what are some of the coping strategies? So think back a little bit further as to what happened during your university days and whether things have changed.
Randy, that's quite a few decades ago. You're putting me on the spot here. I gotta do some hard thinking. But Tommy, I love, you talked about stigma. You related to your background. You talk about the coping, especially with the counseling piece, which is so important. So I'll just reflect on some of my university. So before I was in this role as a team lead / program lead for youth with sight loss, I've tried to always be a trailblazer. I've tried to really rewrite the narrative when it comes to what are the careers or what are the things that a person, quote unquote, a blind person, a person with sight loss cannot do. And I said, no, I can do. So in my former life, I was in fashion. So that is the contradictory to anyone with sight loss because it's quote unquote, it's very visual. There isn't that understanding of a person with sight loss actually foraying into that world. So where I attended my university, so it was the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. So again, I pushed the boundaries of moving to New York, trying to navigate as a person with sight loss. And I have to say my experience there, because I was the only person with sight loss. And I hope that by giving them that exposure on what accommodation means, what it means to really educate a person with sight loss and fine-tune the curriculum to suit my needs, I hope that they've taken those steps to open doors for more persons with sight loss to choose or elect for a career in fashion, that it can be done. And I have to say, their students for disabilities office, or it wasn't quite that, but they were very accommodating, I have to say, because it was a learning curve for them. So my experience, but I've experienced also before going to that university, the same types of experiences Tommy was expanding on. I've had those experiences as well. But on the flip side, being the only person to educate, to advocate, because I still had to advocate to make sure that, hey, you know what? This class is highly visual. How can you make it so I'm able to get the same benefits and same learnings as a person who is able-bodied? So it was a lot of the student teaching the teachers to make it accessible. But even again, I really love that Tomi talked about the counseling portion, because again, I was a foreign student with sight loss. So that was new to the school, but having that point person, I mean, even I had some of the teachers who took the time to sit down with me, and they were actually some of my counselors, which was great, to sit down and ask me, you know what, how are you feeling? How can we do better? What do you need? And it was really nice to see that they would take the steps, but also too, for me, in learning how to cope, I mean, again, a lot of times it is frustrating, and you don't want to, and it is angering, because you're constantly advocating for yourself. It's a constant battle where you have to keep repeating, reteaching. Like we're walking teachers, we're walking advocates, we're walking everything. So really tapping into making them understand that, yes, I'm trying to explain, I'm trying to educate, but then again, put the onus back on the teachers, where you have to learn what it means to provide accessible documents, or accommodate, or even broaching the subject of engaging a person with sight loss, where don't tiptoe around it. Feel free to ask questions, so you have the utmost understanding of what our needs are, because like they say, if you don't know, if you don't ask, you won't know, like with anything. So that's from an educational standpoint, that's what I can lend from my experience. Again, from my background, again, is West Indian, Trinidadian background, and even having the understanding with family or peers. I mean, again, it was an advocacy type situation, because again, there may have been that understanding, or again, they have that, oh, we must take care of you situation, where again, I've always tried to be a person to, what you think I can't do, I am going to do, and find a way to do it. So again, educating and breaking, really dismantling those stereotypes of, because we have a visual limitation, that all is lost. It's not lost. We just have to do things differently. And I equate it to just like an able-bodied, you're learning, just like how you're learning a new course. You're learning something new. There's trial and error. There's questions to be asked. There's research to be done. You're not going to have that understanding the first time, but the more you do it, the better you become at this subject. So again, you're taking those fundamentals of learning to educate yourself, and you're breaking through the stereotypes and the limitations that you think a person with sight loss has.
Thank you, Kia. That was very deep, and it connected really well with what Tomi was saying. So I really love those connections. Let's take a moment to hear if anyone in the audience have questions to ask, and then we will shift gears and go into a different segment. I have some very interesting questions to ask when we come back. All right, so I just want to remind you that we're still under the baobab tree, and we're exploring disability, what you need to know about my experience. And we have with us today Kia, Tomi, Nisha, and Julie. And so far, we've gotten, at least I have heard a lot of information that would really help me in my day-to-day task as a university staff, and as a person on the whole in the community, when we're interacting with folks that has a different ability. Some of what we do need to consider. And now I want to explore some of the rules. Right, these are some important parts because I think it was Tommy that mentioned that staff members were scared, and I figure that this fear is because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to present themselves or what they can and can't say. So let's explore some of that. And Nisha, I'll start with you on this one. How do we introduce ourselves to a person with a visible disability?
Hi, this is Nisha speaking. So I remember something that Julia and both Tommy said. It's like everyone experience is different, especially in the sight loss community. We all have different levels of sight loss. So for myself, the best way for someone to introduce themselves to me is for them to say, "Hi, Nisha, it's Randy. How are you?" Don't wave your hands because I won't see it. So if you come up to me and say hi and your hand is waving, I won't know if you're talking to me or if you're talking to maybe the person behind me or beside me. There have been times where I'm walking and someone just starts talking and I start talking because I think they're talking to me. And sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not. But I find the best way is to approach me and make eye contact because I will make eye contact with you. I will follow the direction of your voice. Therefore, it will tell me where your face and your eyes are. So I will do that. So just approach me and introduce yourself, say who you are, and the conversation will flow from there. I find for me the worst thing is to, no matter what direction you're coming from, don't just come up to me and tap me on the shoulder. That will really scare me because I can't see you. So I'm not sure if you're going to attack or or what. So it's best that you don't touch me until I've acknowledged you and and we have that kind of relationship where you can put your hand on my shoulder or what have you. So I think that's the best way to approach myself.
All right, and I don't know if this is funny or not, but I know that kids always have some other fancy way of greeting each other. And I said kid, so tell me you can, I'm calling you the kid in this room. Tell us, how do students greet each other if it's much different from someone in the workforce? And how would you like fellow students to approach you in the classroom, in the elevator, in the hallways? Just think of those greetings that students might have, opportunities to greet you that students might have, and what is fitting and what is right.
So thank you, Randy, and thank you, Nisha. So as Nisha said, introduce yourself, say your name. Hi, Tommy, it's Cake. um, and that's really, really important because that's the first thing I need to know is who am I talking to. So students at the Mount, in my experience, most of them, they would just start talking. And I've also had students that will start shouting. They won't even shout my name. They'll just say, "Oh, class is canceled. Class is canceled." Like, I don't know. I don't know who you're talking to. So, and some people will even whisper. I've had some friends of mine who would just they'll just be like, "Tommy, Tom." I'm like, okay, is that the fact that you don't want people to know that we're friends, or you just don't know that I can't hear you and I'm too busy focusing on where I'm going to. There's also the people who will be like, oh, that's Tommy. And I hear it, but I don't know what direction it's coming from. If I hear that, so I would go up and say hi. That's what I would like to do. But if you're just like, oh, yeah, Tommy, it's not helpful. So please remember to say your name. And when you say your name, I'm instantly going to pause. So if I'm walking somewhere or anything, I'm going to pause. That's my first reaction. And then you could come to me, and if you want to start a conversation, you can. So I think that's something that students need to take into consideration. And I think I want to use this opportunity to say thank you to Julie and Accessibility Services, because I think they started that trend. I think Julie made it very, I think she made it very serious for staff at Accessibility Services first. So it started from them. Julie was like, hey, Tommy doesn't know who you are because you could be anybody. And it started to flow. I started to see some staff members say, hey, Tommy, it's Catherine. Hey, Tommy. And then I noticed that a few white students were, would do the same. I haven't really seen it with the black students yet. Sorry to racially categorize people. But it's I've seen a few students do it, and I would love to see more students, whether it is that you're from India or Asia. I know it could be weird to introduce yourself over and over and over and over again. But once you start doing it, it's not like a big thing at all.
All right, thanks, Tommy. So there is this other important aspect of introduction, and Julie, you'll understand this, is when we have students come into our offices, they, for me, I don't ask a student when they're coming to my office, do you have a disability? All right, Julie, it might be easier in your sense because students who are coming to most of the students coming to your office are students with disability coming for help. So I'm never prepared for a student with disability. I should be prepared, as I've often said, that we should be set in such a way that you don't have to move the lamps and all that to prepare for someone with a disability. It should be set up whereby everyone should experience the same lighting, because an able body, a disabled body, we can see, if we can see the same light setting, then maybe that's good. Don't make the room too dark and all those kinds of things. I just call it the electric toothbrush effect, whereby everybody uses that electric toothbrush, although it was made for someone with a disability. So how do staff best prepare to meet with students that has disability, that has a disability on campus, and a visible disability at that?
Okay, thanks. That's a great question, Randy. And I have lots to say on that too. I think the simplest, most succinct way I could respond would be to prepare yourself for a human to come and meet with you. Every person is different, we all have hearts and minds and hopefully kindness and compassion within us, and you proceed accordingly. So if you happen to notice that something is glaringly not accessible to the person that you're meeting, it's okay to say it out loud in a kind, respectful, ask the question, really. A lot of people, I think, I don't know who said this earlier, but someone spoke to, and even Tommy said, when you're young, what you don't know, you kind of shy from. So if you think you see a person with a visual disability, you back away from it because you don't know. So my suggestion is to approach everyone that way all the time. I feel blessed actually to come from such a diverse campus, and such a small, diverse campus, that is, because we can communicate with each other within our departments. And whether it is we're trying to maintain culturally sensitive approaches to international students, or culturally sensitive approaches to students with disabilities, or I just prefer, how about a culturally sensitive approach to people? That's my recommendation. You said, Randy, moving lamps around, or making sure a person can see what they need to see. a big aspect of what we do in accessibility services is try and as a part of like advocating on behalf of students with disabilities is promoting universal design. I kind of think of Tomi referenced, how to be greeted and what would be an appropriate way. And, for somebody with vision loss, using your voice is the most respectful way to introduce yourself. However, somebody with hearing loss requires, your eye contact, or somebody with, any kind of neurodiverse type of disability, myself included, ADHD. I am not listening to you unless I see your eyes. One of the reasons I have my video on right now and closed captioning so that I can stay focused and maintain, this is what I need to kind of, to communicate. And so the best thing to do for, Tomi in a class may not be ideal for another student in the same class. So I work with not just individual students, but with their environment to try and create something that is equitable for all of the students in the class, so that everyone can participate in an equal way. And then the other part of that is, Tomi mentioned something, about feeling judged. And absolutely, I think we all feel that way in different circumstances, depending on where we are. But one of the most poignant moments of my career at the Mount has been a student that had a visual disability, and he was in a wheelchair, and he came to me to complain about what he perceived as an able-bodied student using, delaying his ability to get into the elevator to get to class on time. And further conversation revealed that student was actually another student that I knew with vision loss, and it impaired his ability for depth perception and color. So our stairwells in that building, the stairs are gray, the walls are gray, the ceiling is gray, and everything is gray. So it is not safe for that student to go up and down the stairs. And that student needed to use the elevator too. So it was kind of a reverse judgment in that regard, but it's kind of something that I use often because it's impactful. I think, what you see in front of you is not always accurate. I think the kindest thing to do is to ask questions and be respectful of humans and of people.
Very good point, Julie. Thank you for that. I think Nisha wants to jump in there. Go ahead, Nisha.
Thank you, Randy. I just wanted to add also that it's important not to grab somebody's cane or pet their guide dog or interact with the guide dog in the sight loss community. I find for individuals, I was thinking about what Tomi was saying. I find for me, I'm also of a West Indian background. My parents are Trinidadian as well. And I find when I encounter people who are of a similar background of myself from various parts of the Caribbean, when I ask for help, there's this mode that comes over them where they want to grab my arm or take my cane and take me wherever. And it's like, no, just tell me, use descriptions, use details, and guide me to whichever way, I'm asking you to guide me. Let me tell you it's okay for me to touch your arm, or it's okay for you to touch my cane. There's this protective mode I feel that comes over those in my culture sometimes, where when you ask a question, there's that knee-jerk reaction to do it rather than let me do it. That my asking question has given you permission to do it for me, where it actually hasn't yet. I haven't said that yet. So I just wanted to add that point in as well.
Very good point, Nisha. And what I want to focus on next, because this ties really nicely in with what both you and Julie just mentioned. It's all focused on what people are doing. But let's talk about what people are saying. How do I, as an able-bodied person, avoid saying the wrong things? Kia, can you start off with this question? Then I'll ask Tomi to jump in on that.
As I mentioned before, when it comes, Kia speaking, when it comes to not knowing what to say, again, don't be afraid to ask. Again, words are powerful. Ask, sometimes you have to think before you speak. Ask the person about, if you're not sure about, the nature of the disability, or even what are the do's and don'ts, but also to take accountability and research. Always, always research. So you have an understanding, a basic understanding, when it comes to, again, Nisha brought up guide, how to interact with the person with sight loss using a cane, guide dog. How do even if when it comes to sighted guide, which that's the technique we use for guiding in specific, in precarious spaces if needed, but how to approach. So all of these things, again, they're all on but Google is your best friend, I must say. It's on the CNIB website. It's also, you can Google these things. Also, again, for students who don't know, you have your Students for Disabilities office, and you can speak to the counselors there. So you have resources so you can tap into to educate yourself. So those are the key things I would say.
Thank you. And Tomi, you want to jump in there and help
Yes.
us understand?
Please do not use the word handicapped. That's a very, very touchy word. Don't ever use the word handicapped. Anyway. Some people have reclaimed the word, but for me, if I come into a situation, and don't talk about, sometimes someone will be guiding you, and people start to talk about your disability while you're there. Like, that's something that I find very, very offensive. Don't talk about my disability to whoever is guiding me, or just while I'm there, and then you just start to, and I've been in an office before at the Mount. I'm not gonna say what office it was, but these people started to give each other sign language about my disability, and they were like, she's okay, like this. And I was like, I know what you guys are doing. Like, I'm not, don't think that you can don't think that you can hide what you're doing, because you don't even know my level of vision. Like, you don't try to cut corners and communicate. I always know. So that's just something that I will say. And I want to talk about a little bit about the office, like being a staff member, and how to prepare for a student with a disability. I would say I would like every staff member, whether it's faculty, non-faculty, before you have a meet, like when you and a student are scheduling an appointment, type in the email, how can I best prepare for our meeting? Because you may not even know if the person has a disability, or maybe the person just has unique needs, because the person may need you to take notes, or while you're talking. For instance, if I went to academic advising, I can't write, like, if I write down the courses you want me to take, I won't be able to see that when I leave. And using JAWS in your office may distract me from our conversation about courses. So it may be better for you to take the notes and email me and say, hey, Tomi, these are our notes. These are all the things that we said we would do. These are the courses you need to take. So if people could just add that line, it could even be part of your that box in Outlook where you put your name and your position. How best do I prepare for you for your arrival? That's something that I think is necessary. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Tommy. I love that additional piece that you've added there for us. And just to remind the audience that you're on the mobile tree with us, and we are discussing disability. And I think what I'm going to do next is ask Julie for you to jump in here, because Tommy came from the perspective of someone with a visible disability. How about those students who have an invisible disability? How do we interact with them, and how do we avoid saying the wrong things? Like, for instance, is it okay to ask that student, "Are you dyslexic?" or "Are you," those kinds of things? So tell us, what are the taboos? And help us to understand where these boundary lines need to be drawn. Thanks.
That is also a loaded question that I could talk for a long time about. Excellent, thank you. Tommy, I just wrote that down. I'm going to fix that. Your experience that you explained about, or your suggestion to add that statement to our appointment booking system, I'm going to fix that. So thank you for letting me know. The other thing is, how do you avoid saying the wrong things? It's hard to explain. Don't say the wrong thing. Don't say anything that's unkind. It doesn't matter whether they have a visible or invisible disability. Again, treat people like people, and whether they have one leg or 5 legs, or can see or not see, or can focus or not focus. Just speak to the best of your kindness. Is my suggestion. Speak to a person's name. What is your name? Asking questions is an okay thing to do. And if you're not sure, asking questions, but in a kind way. I think also being globally accepting of all people, all bodies, all limitations, all abilities is the right approach to take. So you should never assume anything about anyone. I'm not sure what the stats are on, I have a terrible working memory. So anyway, I'm not sure what the stats are on, the number of invisible disabilities in the world, but I'm sure there's huge. Mental health is included in that, which is a big part of it. But I think the accountability in that regard goes on both sides. So just like if someone, I've noticed, and some guide dogs will have a little a part on their vest or their their little shirts. They're not called that, I'm sure. That's not the technical word, but their clothes, or there's something. There'll be something that says, "Please don't pet my dog." I've seen. So just like there's accountability on us, I'm saying all of us, to be respectful and kind to other people, and to respect their limitations and abilities. I think it goes both ways. I myself have a disability. I speak out about it all the time, and so I will often preface, in a video meetings in particular, which I found very challenging the last year. The impulsive nature of ADHD in me makes me want to, impulsively blurt out my thoughts and opinions and interrupt all the time, and so I've found that very difficult. So I typically, if people don't know me, I might often say that out loud, just so you know, I'm sorry, I'm going to try to keep it in check, but I'm going to raise my hand, and this is how I'm going to communicate with you. So if you see my hand, know that I have something burning to say and something to add to your conversation. So I think just as it's the responsibility of all of us to be educated and aware as much as we can, we're never going to experience what it feels like, or know exactly what it feels like to be in someone else's shoes, regardless of whatever diagnosis or disability or whatever it is you identify with. So I think it comes down to humanity and being kindness to others.
Thank you, Julie. Well said. Nisha, let me ask you, and Julie, I'll ask you this again very shortly. To just name some of the resources or places that our listeners can find resources. You'd mentioned earlier that there's loads of information out there for to answer various questions. But if we can be specific about just a few places that our listeners can turn to for information, that would be great. I'll ask Nisha, and then Julie, you can just jump in right after Nisha. Hank.
Yes, this is Nisha. So, when you say resources, Randy, you mean resources on site laws, on how to do cited guide, on guide dogs, because there's so many paths that this could take.
Yeah, absolutely. So just break it down for us, because just by me asking this question, you've already told the public how ignorant I am about this whole topic of disability. I don't even know what's out there. So just give us a glimpse of what's out there, and you just mentioned a whole lot there. Give us a few.
Well, where I would start, especially for the younger crowd, the youth, I would actually start with YouTube. There are so many great influencers out there from the sight loss community. One that instantly comes to mind is Molly Burke, who happens to be Canadian, and she is a guide dog user, and she breaks down in her videos a lot of her experiences with her guide dog, what you should and should not do, and also experiences with the cane and her journey, her sight loss journey. So as a young person who might not want to sit down and read a whole bunch of resources, I think YouTube is a great place to start. Like Kia said, Google is everyone's best friend, on your phone, Safari or Google. Just go on there and type in whatever it is you want to know. How do I sign up for a guide dog? How do I practice sighted guide? And you'll get a bunch of resources and videos on how to best work with someone with sight loss. And probably the first thing that might pop up when you Google search is the CNIB. So feel free to visit our website, cnib.ca, and you will get a plethora of resources. Like Kia mentioned at the beginning, that's where you'll find our three distinct levels of service, from vision loss rehab to our center, CNIB Foundation, to the deafblind community as well. So if you're not a YouTube user or not a Google user and you want to just start at the foundation, maybe you want to start with our website, cnib.ca, and then from there you'll get hopefully the guidance that you need and your starting point, your foundation.
Yeah, go ahead, Julie. You jump right in.
Okay. Thanks, Randy. Nisha, that's excellent. I agree with all of that. YouTube, Google, you literally can type your exact question in Google. How can I be respectful to a person in a wheelchair, as an example? And then, diffuse the results from there to try and find the kindest, most respectful way to kind of proceed is my suggestion. The other thing is, again, organizations like CNIB, organizations that are specific to the diagnosis. Understood.org is a great website. rickhansen.com. Also, another great resource. One of my favorite, as far as etiquette and awareness goes, is scope.org, and there is a project initiative that they produced a video series of short videos called End the Awkward, and they're awesome and amazing. I love them. They're very poignant and impactful, and they teach you what to do in very obvious, sarcastic ways that speak to my sense of humor. So you might enjoy checking some of those out as well.
Thank you, Julie. And I want to thank you all for participating today in this podcast. Just to remind our listeners that you're on the Baobab Tree, and today we're exploring disability, what you need to know about my experience. You've been graced with the presence of Kia, Tommy, Nisha, and Julie, and I'm your host today. My name is Randy Headley, and I want to thank you, the panelists, for being here. You've today with us. You've been very much insightful, and you've inspired me to explore this topic even more. So thank you again for participating.